1995, we made this record that Grasshopper and I thought was just gorgeous. It was called See You on the Other Side. And worldwide, I think that's about how many people bought it. And it had all these beautiful things that we really fell in love with, oboes and flutes, and it had French horns and trumpets and strings. And we thought, this is it. We've really made this really special record. We can't wait to get out on the road. This is 1995, and this is going to be just our year. And little did we see on the horizon this giant dark cloud coming at us. And on the cloud were written in these giant neon signs, Britpop. Now suddenly overnight, nobody wants to hear oboes or flutes. Everybody wants to know Oasis versus Blur versus Limp Bizkit. I don't know who was in the mix, but everybody seemed to be in the mix except for a band like us, where we were making this beautiful orchestral music that we felt was really special, but it didn't reach anybody. And at the end of that tour, which was really hard, you know, we were already a band very fragile, really right on the edge, as it was. And Grasshopper and I, when we got home to the Catskill Mountains, we just lost it. I mean, really. And I know what? I know a lot of you can sort of identify with this when you just go into this really dark space. It feels like you just landed on the moon, and everything is just dark around you. And no lights go off, there's no parade, there's no explosions that say, hey, you've hit rock bottom. None of that happens, does it? It's really, really quiet. And you can hear your own footsteps even just walking, just going. And it really was a really dark time for us. I mean, the way we saw making Deserter Songs, it wasn't our next record. The way we really saw it was going to be our last record. Because nobody was waiting at that time in 96, 97 for another Mercury Rev record. Really, nobody was. The label had dropped us and everybody else had just sort of split the scene. And we were left with basically just ourselves and Dave Fridman. And one of the things that as Grassy and I were making the record, we were asking Dave, and he was asking us, and we were just, the three of us were together in the room. We said, this is it, isn't it? And we sort of looked at each other and said, yeah, I think it is. You know, nobody's waiting for this record, and nobody's calling to say, we'd like to hear a new one. So, strange as it may seem that we're here playing this now, at the time, I thought we were making a cassette for friends because I never thought it would ever come out. You see, we weren't really escaping into some fantasy world like people might write about it and say, yeah, they had this whole thing planned for Deserter Songs and all this orchestral movement and everything. No, we were retreating, actually, into the only place that we actually felt safe, which was the music that we grew up on. Now, I grew up in the Catskill Mountains, which is in New York State, but it's not near New York City. And Grasshopper, he grew up way in the hinterlands, New York, up along the Canadian border, where there's just nothing but wind. And we didn't grow up amidst punk rock. It didn't reach us where we were living. We didn't have the Ramones. We didn't have the Buzzcocks. We weren't fighting against urban decay or big unemployment. I was living in the mountains. The only thing I really knew was like witches and bears. And the music that, you know, my mother would play me, which was strange as it seems for like a 7-year-old, 8-year-old child at the time, but she was playing all this really heavy orchestral stuff. I'd wake up in the morning and there would be Night on Bald Mountain by Mussorgsky. I didn't know what to make of it. And I know Grasshopper as well because he grew up along the Canadian border where there was just only that strange, and I know maybe some of you have been to America and you've heard AM radio. Not FM, but AM radio. And how strange it is. Where it'll segue from Elvis into the Andrews Sisters into something really bizarre, and that's what he grew up on. And no one actually told us, like, hey, these orchestral songs that you're making and that you're thinking about, that's not rock and roll. I didn't have an older brother saying, slow down. Mussorgsky is not cool. I didn't have that. And so the music we're going to hear tonight was that safe place that we had when we had nothing left in the mid-90s. It was the only place that we actually knew that was deep inside of our DNA. And we knew when we were making it, strangely enough, that because we had spoken about it with Dave Fridman, our bass player, and we said, well, we're going to go for broke then. If no one's waiting for this record, if no one cares whether we make another one, we're going to go for broke. What do we have to lose? We don't have anything. And that, strangely enough, that was the salvation, and maybe that's part of some of the reason why you're here, is we had nothing left to lose. Our backs were to the wall, so we decided to stand out from the rest, from that big, giant black cloud. Now I bring this up because we have someone really close to us on stage tonight who also stood out against a lot of what was going on around him in the 80s as well, and that's Simon Ramon. Now, my good friend, you were up against it as well. You were there with Haircut 100.